To lead in a world that never stops evolving, you need insights from those who are driving change. Welcome to Breakthrough Innovations, where we bring together the top leaders and innovators who are reshaping their industries. I'm JL Heather, the Principal Executive Coach at Center, and in each episode, I sit down with game-changing executives who share the strategies, insights, and challenges that fuel their success. In the next 20 minutes, you'll gain practical takeaways to drive your own breakthroughs. So if you're ready to stay ahead, join us here on Breakthrough Innovations. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Breakthrough Innovations. I'm joined today by Robert Feeney, the Chief Vision Officer of Knowledge as a Service and the Habit Man, based on his work turning learning into habit formation. Robert is the co-creator of the Ringorang software as a service platform, a clinically proven technology which uses gamification and microlearning to reinforce learning in just 1 to 3 minutes of daily engagement. His company, Knowledge as a Service, has applied this technology to support critical habit formation in leadership behaviors at large-scale enterprises like IBM, safety behaviors at government agencies like the USDA, and employability skills through nonprofits and schools across the country. Robert, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I know we talked a little bit before, and I'm fascinated by your story, and I'd love it if you would kind of tell your story for our episode, or
My story. Okay. Well, you've established there that I'm known as the habit man in a lot of circles. How that came about was a long, circuitous route that started back when I was in Hollywood first. What actually precipitated that was really interesting, and it was kind of dramatic. I lost both my older and my younger brother to suicide, and that really launched me into what I usually call a quest. It's been kind of like a quest all my life for what's the key to behavior change? What's the key to adopting a behavior that makes your life work, regardless of what your circumstances are, regardless of your wiring. And I went to Hollywood thinking, hey, this is where I can tell stories that'll be inspiring or aspiring to people, and that'd be a way to do it. When I was there, I discovered advertising. The advertising technique is, well, first of all, advertising is what runs Hollywood largely. And so the technique for advertising is fascinating because it tells a story by the drip. If you think about how advertising works in all of our lives, we learn about a brand or we learn messaging from a product by the drip, and no one takes a class on it. No one takes a course on Doritos. We just kind of know it. And then, that moment happens when you walk down the grocery store aisle and you're going to pick Doritos instead of the other corn chip, is the way I often like to style it. So that storytelling weaves its way into our day. And that was the underpinnings of what then became a habit formation technology that I developed in Ringorang, and have since, in my own mission to help people take on new behaviors, have become known as the Habit Man. And now I do this in all sorts of different frames, all different types of curriculum, but everything from professional skills like leadership or professional skills like how do I be valuable to any employer at an entry level, all the way to really acute situations like mental health and sustaining yourself, even as far as getting out of addictions and avoiding suicide.
Awesome. And I know when we talked earlier, one of the things that came up was this idea that training, whatever it may be, by itself doesn't really do much of anything.
Right.
Especially in the long term.
Yeah.
And what fascinated me is this connection that you've made from training to something that helps people pull that into their lives over the course of time. And I think it's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to seeing the demo of Ringorang. I think we've got that on the schedule coming up.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's, you just said it. I mean, and we all kind of know it. And if you look at the statistics for corporate training, it's fascinating because it's almost a $400 billion industry every year, where around the world, how much money and time and how much cost really goes into training people, and it just doesn't work, and everyone knows it doesn't work. Not one of us has ever gone to a corporate training and gone, I got so much out of that. No, you just don't.
You say fascinating, I think depressing, but
Right. Yes. And actually, I mean, this is me in a good mood about it. If I'm in a bad mood about it, I really get up on my stump about it and say, come on, folks, that is not only $400 billion, like just flushed down the drain, but it is also thoroughly disingenuous to try to hold forth to the world that this is how we've got your back to help you become good at your job or to help you get good at life. It's disingenuous. It's not helping you. But the problem is unless you got an alternative, you can't be straight about it that way. And
Absolutely.
that's what we're here to present.
No, I love it. And I think this idea of a solution that actually helps people adopt new and more productive behaviors is really powerful. And I think when we look at things from an innovation perspective, there's definitely a set of behaviors that are more innovative, more productive towards innovative ideas. And I'm curious, as you look in this innovation space, knowing what you know, how does Ringorang fit, and how does that behavior change, that behavior adoption happen?
Yeah, I'm really geeky about innovation. I get right down into the molecules of it. And behavior change is imperative if there's going to be any change
right,
at all. And innovation by definition is bringing something into existence that didn't exist before.
Right.
So that's change. Now, if you really think about it, learning is meant to be change. The only reason we ever learn anything is to change something in our life, to do something different, right? But we don't really think of it that way so much. We don't measure it that way. It's more like, do I remember something? And even that doesn't work, unfortunately. But innovation, what it takes is there are several layers to it. And I've done talks on this, and one day I had to write a book about it just because I get really obsessed with the pieces. And they are...
Absolutely.
The very first one is you just got to get past yourself and your own barriers to change, because it doesn't matter how much of an innovation junkie you are, and I am one of those, you get stopped by your own internal dialogue that tells you that's not for you, or you can't do that, or there are circumstances in the way, or I don't feel like it, or 1,000 other things that we tell ourselves that get us stopped. But there is a practice that a person can take on, and that's the behavior change. There's got to be a practice you take on for stepping past that. And there's a way to do it. The other layers that you then have to get past are things like, how do you then activate other people around you, like a team, to innovate? And then if you're in a company, let's say, how do you get that innovation funded? That's a different conversation that often gets it stopped. How do you then drive the change once you've got it funded and developed that's going to actually make it live in the world? And then lastly, of course, it's once it lives in the world, how do you sustain it? So
Right.
each one of those is a choke point, that kills innovation.
A stage gate, a choke point. I like that.
Yeah.
And when you think about in that moment, we spend a lot of time in workshops trying to get cross-functional teams to really work together and innovate.
Yeah.
When you think about, are there specific behaviors as a innovation junkie as a innovation junkie yourself, what are those behaviors that you really feel like drive the innovation in the moment, allow the ideas to flow?
Well, so I named for you there 5 of them, right? Not those are more like circumstances or phenomenons to make sure that innovation doesn't die or that it can live. So I'll narrow it down to one of them for the sake of this conversation, because it's the one that lives most loudly for all of us. And that is our own barrier to innovation, that first gateway we got to get through. And it's this gateway that I'm calling it that actually has us decide whether we're people or not, which is kind of our own myth that we create. Like, I'm an innovative person, or this person is innovative, this person's not so innovative. What they're really doing is judging the fruits of their labors, right? This person tends to stick with the status quo, and this person tends to break stuff. So that's all valid. But where we could get really screwed up is thinking that that's somehow endemic to the human. It's not. All of us can innovate. One person gets stopped. The other person has a tendency not to get stopped, or not as often. So here's the behavior. The behavior is something that I call the heat of the moment. It's the phenomenon around it. And the behavior itself is simply being able to step past the barrier that you create for yourself. The only way you can do that is you got to identify that you created it for yourself. You've got no power over it if somebody else created it. So, for example, if I'm in a company and I want to be innovative, I want to be what's often called an intrapreneur, right? I want to invent inside of a company, right? I'm not creating a new company. I'm just inside. I want to build something. And you have it that, well, people around here just always do things the way it's the status quo. So I'm just not. I've tried bringing up some ideas before and they got shot down. I'm not going to do it. I just got stopped. And I had it in that conversation in my head. that I'd proven that this is not an innovative environment. And I brought up an idea before and it got shot down. And now I've got a narrative that tells me I can't innovate here. Yeah. So that's a phenomenon that I call heat of the moment, because there was a moment when that guy had a conversation or was giving an idea, sitting at lunch maybe, and another person said, well, this, can't do it. Shot down is the way it registered. In the heat of that moment, I got stopped.
Yeah.
And now I'm replaying that, and it ain't going to happen.
And there's kind of like two elements to what you're talking about there that I really like. One is the self-perception. What kind of person am I? Am I an innovator? Am I creative? Or am I something else? Mm-hmm. That's really powerful. Like our self-perception drives so much of our behavior and we shape it. The other 100%. Part of it is that narrative that gets formed. You know, we have what's called an episodic memory. So the narrative drives a lot of our behavior as well. And the combination of the two has a lot of control over how we act and who we are. And I love what you're saying. We have power over the narrative and our self-perception.
Yeah,
that is really empowering to hear.
But think about it, to have the power over that narrative, we have to acknowledge that we created it ourselves. Right. And that's what I don't even like to do that most of the time. I mean, I've taken on a practice, and that's the behavior. It's a behavior that I've taken on as a practice of acknowledging that the voice in my head is actually mine. I created it. Nobody else, no circumstances, no other people. Even though I can get plenty of evidence that tells me, like the guy who shot down my idea, I'm the one who interpreted that conversation as an idea shot down, and therefore I created all that. He didn't. So that practice is acknowledging that and then dropping it or setting it aside, however you will, and saying, all right, that was that conversation, that context, that idea, etc. Now I'm going to do this. Yeah. And now I'm going to do this. And you keep doing it over and over, because to your reflection you were just giving me there is no such thing as an innovative person like it's endemic to them. Right. And every human being innovates all the time. Absolutely. We're always innovating. We just don't recognize it that way. We don't give it that acknowledgement. And if we did, what would be possible is the wonderful rhetorical question.
I love it. And as leaders, we have a really big opportunity to help people do these things, to work on their self-perception, and to build the filters they need to take that feedback in without damaging a positive self-perception. I love it. I love it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I get a bit obsessed with this because it changed my life. So I got this out of an event. There was an event called the Landmark Forum. Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Landmark Forum, I did it 7 years ago. And before then, I had already been a leader in business. And somebody told me I ought to go to this event. It's a 3.5-day event then, if you've heard of it. And this person had told me, well, you can get leadership behaviors out of it. So I thought, all right, I'll do it. I'll get some leadership stuff. And what I ended up getting was my family back, as a matter of fact. It was an entirely different transformation of my life. But then it absolutely turned me inside out in my perceptions of what leadership is. Right. And so much of what I'm describing here of this conversation around innovation is actually the way a leader needs to tune their mind so that they can be effective. For example, when I have a conversation with someone and they seem to shoot down my idea, right then and there, I'm going to make something up about it. Right?
Your interpretation.
What's that?
Your interpretation.
My interpretation of what just happened. And then whether I like it or not, my brain is automatically going to put that on repeat. That's just how it's wired to do that. I can't even stop it from doing that. What I can do is not try to make it mean something it doesn't actually mean.
Right.
So I can get that it was an interpretation and that my brain is just wired that way, okay? So a leader has an opportunity moment by moment, getting all sorts of feedback, teams pushing back, companies not hitting its numbers, there's something new we got to break through in order to be competitive. There's lots of input that's coming in that's usually telling you that your boat's going to sink at some point. It can really be interpreted, there's that word again, as negative. And what the leader does is it's not so much turning it into positive thinking as it is saying, that's input. I'm going to go take an action, and that action usually means you got to enroll a number of people or a single person or whatnot in taking certain actions. And then you got to measure that those are being taken. But before I did the forum, that's not the way I went about it. And I thought I was a pretty good leader. There wasn't a lot of evidence to that, but it was at least my interpretation was I was a good leader.
Yeah.
Before the forum, what I did was I needed to make sure that the people around me were agreeing with each other. And if they weren't agreeing with each other, at least I could get agreement with them. And agreement usually showed up for me as being really nice and kind with them and being liked and figuring out how I could do something that would be inoffensive to them. It was like, and then I played middleman among everybody else. Man, looking back on it now, I just say that was horrifying. It was awful. It was terribly unproductive. And it had me people pleasing everybody, and we failed. Yep. So now, beyond the forum now, I've actually get persistent coaching. This is that gateway I told you where you got to sustain the innovation once you get it. So I've got a practice now of one thing I learned out of it is that being liked has nothing to do with anything except being liked.
Right.
And I have it kind of wired that I want to be liked. And so I naturally go to that. And my practice now has me stop, look at that and say, what am I having this conversation for? Like, what am I really up to in this conversation? And then what I do is I step past trying to be liked by the person or people and request of them something that I'm up to and ask them to be a part of it. It's making a request for them to come join me in the thing I'm up to. And in that, the responses I'm going to get are going to push back, agree. It's going to be all sorts of things. And my job is to help all of them sort it out.
Right.
Not to sort it out myself, not to be the hero, not to be liked, none of that stuff that has to do with me and my identity and what I want to interpret about me. It just has to do with how do I help these people be functionally powerful in achieving something. And man,
I love this whole conversation, right? It's how do you empower yourself through self-leadership and how do you empower others through a more general form of leadership? And I know when I think about this, that's a lot of what leadership and innovation is about, an empowered team coming up with new and innovative solutions.
100%.
Now, I know Ringorang has been moving into some new markets and kind of expanding where your influence goes. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about where you're going and what your plans are?
Well, sure. Thank you for bringing that up. So Ringorang, as the behavior change software that it is, very much like what I was just describing, when we take this into a new market, we're helping them find a phenomenon in their organization that they didn't know was available, which is that you can actually target, kind of map out for yourself what behaviors and habits have to be formed so that you get an organizational result. And most of the time, that bridge has just never been there. It's always been, they're going to go through their learning, we're going to tick the box that they learned, and then we're going to go out in the world and try to perform. And hopefully we can just manage that into place. But there's a bridge between those two, which is that you can, in the flow of a person's day, coach them by the nudge until they actually get there and they're performing and they've got habits around that. So we're going into new markets, but the beautiful part of, and I appreciate you bringing this up, the beautiful part of where we are right now is the clinical proof and the enterprises we worked with, and now the schools have shown us what's possible. And now we're like throwing the doors open to go into a variety of new markets that are likely going to be right now, healthcare, financial, cybersecurity awareness, areas where it's really critical that human beings do something differently. And I will tell you my favorite one, because this is the one that I've been working on with the U.S. Air Force and some nonprofits, and that is mental health and suicide prevention. It's like actually helping a person to know how to step past that moment when all of your interpretations are telling you that you should stop, like you should end this. And if you can just take on a practice of acknowledging that you made that up, and step past it, you can hear the theme. It's the same for mental health as it is for performance in leadership, as it is for innovating in an organization.
I love it. Really powerful. If anyone's looking to get in touch with you, engage with Ringorang, what's the best way to get in touch?
Oh, yeah. Well, you can, probably the best way is on socials for me, like LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook as well. I'm kind of out there a lot talking about what it is that is possible for the world. But you can also go to ringorang.com. And if you're involved with career and technical education, we've got a program called the Future Ready National Game Tournament. It's Future Ready by Ringorang, but it's styled as a tournament for mostly school students. And you can go to futureready.work to see that. It's a fairly recent launch of ours, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone listening can find something to pull out of this and be empowered themselves. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you, JL. Thanks for having me.